All right. So, there's a playlist I did 2 years ago, which it was all 100 years of the NHL's history, including, of course, the year that the Spanish influenza shut things down. So, 2020, well, yeah, we're going to get into this. The 2019-2020 season, the one that started with such promise, and then we had the huge pause, right? So, March 11th, as the games are being played, we all know these will be the last games of the regular season. No idea when hockey's coming back. No idea what's going to happen. No idea if there's going to be a playoffs. And so at the time of the pause, not all teams have played the same number of games. And at the time of the pause, there was definitely some discussions about who belonged in the playoffs and who didn't. So the NHL and the NHLPA come up with a not necessarily what we would all deem perfect way to solve this problem, but they find a way to solve the problem as well as they can. So as a pandemic is gripping the world globally and it's hitting North America, everything's getting shut down, and then it's a matter of, okay, the best, safest way to come back would be a bubble situation. And they decided to play the games in Edmonton and Toronto, though Vegas was a leading contender until local numbers went in the wrong direction in Vegas. And then Vancouver was a leading contender until NHL safety protocols didn't match up with BC Health and what they wanted to see happen. So it was a lot of uncertainty between March and August. There was a lot of rumor, a lot of what may happen, what may not. And so when they came back, they decided we've got to figure out the standings, but not every team's played the same number of games. So we'll go by winning percentage, which is inelegant. It's not necessarily a fantastic way to do it, and I'll show you guys why. So the points add up until you get down to here, where Toronto and Columbus both had one more point than the Islanders, but the Islanders had played 2 less games. So by winning percentage, the Islanders had a higher seed, and Toronto had more wins than Columbus, so they end up finishing ahead of Columbus. And then you get down to the Rangers had one more point than Florida, so you would have had the Rangers against the Islanders. You would have had Florida against Columbus, or against Carolina, I should say. But that's not how it works out. And of course, the Montreal Canadiens, who finished with 71 points, they were at the time of the pause 10 points back of 8th place. 9 points back of 8th place New York Islanders. They weren't going to make the playoffs. But because of this new situation, they end up having a chance at the playoffs. And of course, people were like, okay, that means they're going to win it. And then for Buffalo fans, they weren't happy because they had 2 extra games to play. So they had 2 games in hand on Montreal. They were 3 points back. Technically, if they won both of those games, they would have been in the play-in. They weren't. And so that separation could very well be part of the reason why Buffalo is looking at a whole new management structure, a whole new everything. And yet, for Montreal, things are pretty good. Things are trending in the right direction. New Jersey, Ottawa, and Detroit all end up missing out on the return because the NHL, though there were rumors that all 31 teams could end up playing, the NHL looks at the cost of this and just the reality of you don't want Detroit to end up having a Stanley Cup chance after this season they had. So those 7 teams that missed the play-in round would end up having a chance at the draft lottery, before we know who else is going to get into the draft lottery, which is whole other headache. So in the Western Conference, St. Louis ends up finishing first to Boston's first in the East, and things look good, but the top 4 seeds will be decided by a tournament, by a round-robin tournament. And some teams seem to be more tuned in and dialed into that tournament than others. So at the end of it, Philadelphia ends up being the number 1 seed, even though they were number 4 coming into the tournament. Tampa Bay ends up number 2, Washington number 3, and Boston finishes 4th. Boston doesn't seem to be keying into this at all. In the West, Vegas moves from 3rd to 1st at the end of the tournament. Colorado stays 2nd. Dallas actually moves up to 3rd because St. Louis, they just don't seem to be as into it either, and they end up finishing 4th. We would find out after they were eliminated from the playoffs that St. Louis had been affected by the pandemic that was going on. Players had contracted it. Now, St. Louis doesn't use this as an excuse after, but they do admit after that this was, having an effect on the team. And it is notable, absolutely notable, that in between March and August, everybody gets pretty healthy. And it does change things. Where momentum that was totally on the side of the Philadelphia Flyers at the time of the pause, now it's kind of sort of gone. Although they do finish with the number 1 seed. So how did it turn out in the playoffs? Well, we have the play-in round first. So technically it's still listed as a play-in round qualifying for the Stanley Cup playoffs. They are the Stanley Cup qualifiers to get to round 1. So the Stanley Cup qualifiers, Montreal upsets Pittsburgh. And so that's the number 12 seed beating the number 5 seed in 4 games. It was a best of 5 series, so 3-1. The number 6 seeded Carolina, they eliminated the number 11 seed Rangers with ease. They beat them in 3 straight. And this was after the Rangers had owned Carolina during the regular season. New York Islanders, the number 7 seed, they take out the number 10 seeded Florida in 4 games. And Columbus goes to the full 5 games against Toronto in what was an absolutely thrilling matchup between those two teams. That was a great series between those two teams, and in the end, it was, another heartbreaker for Leaf fans, but great series all around. A lot of controversy, but tight, close series tend to have its share of controversy. Out west, number 12 seeded Chicago does to Edmonton, the number 5 seeds, what Montreal had done to Pittsburgh. They did it in 4 games as well, so 3-1. Arizona, the number 11 seed, they upset the number 6 seeded Nashville, 3-1 as well. And for Vancouver, 3-1 is their advantage over Minnesota, the number 10 seed. So numbers 5 and 6 go out in the West. Number 5 goes out in the East. And for the Oilers, it's a shame because the Oilers, when you look at it, they had 83 points in 71 games. They played 2 more games than Dallas, had 1 more point than Dallas. So technically, by points, they would have been ahead of Dallas. But by winning percentage, they were below Dallas. And so, a great season that they had kind of ends up going by the wayside because of the upset loss to Chicago. And then Calgary, the number 8 seed, takes out Winnipeg in 4. But where that series changed was injuries suffered by the Winnipeg Jets, and there was definitely a lot of complaining about how Calgary ends up winning that series from the Winnipeg side, and it was, if it's a war of attrition, Calgary won that. So that rounds out your play-in rounds, and it leaves crazy matchups for round 1. Round 1, Montreal, the number 8 seed, ends up losing against Philadelphia in 6. So 4-2 series win for Philadelphia. But Philadelphia doesn't look great in that series. This is not like the team that looked as good as they did going into the break. This team doesn't look quite as solid. Tampa Bay, the number 2 seed, they take out Columbus in 5. So 4-1 over the number 7 seed Columbus. Columbus was unable to replicate what they had done last year against Tampa because Tampa just decided, no, we're not allowing that to happen again. The New York Islanders, the number 6 seed, they upset Washington in round 1, 4-1. So the number 3 seeded Capitals, the discussion then afterwards is how seriously did they take it? How hard were they playing? The reason I never did that during the playoffs is because I think that tries to diminish what the Islanders did. As if Capitals had really wanted to win, if they really tried, the Islanders would have been out. And I don't think that's the case. I think there was plenty of effort from the Capitals. I just think the Islanders were better. The number 4 seeded Boston Bruins, they took out the number 5 seed Carolina Hurricanes in 5. A series that I thought, hey, this is going to be a lot closer than last year, and Carolina doesn't lose in round 1, and then they did. So Carolina takes out the Rangers, and then they lose to the Boston Bruins. Out west, the number 1 seed Vegas Golden Knights, they survived Corey Crawford and the Blackhawks, beating them 4-1. So both Montreal and Chicago, the number 12 seeds, which people immediately said, well, these teams are going to be the ones that go to the Stanley Cup final because it's going to be a big old joke, and 2020 is a joke and all this, and 2020 is kind of a joke, but not a ha-ha joke either, not a funny one, not at all. But the number 12 seeds were taken care of by the number 1 seeds in both conferences. Colorado, 4-1 series win over the Arizona Coyotes, and the only reason that series goes to 5 is because of Darcy Kemper. If not for Kemper, it would have been an easy sweep. The Dallas Stars, the number 3 seed, then take out the Calgary Flames, who were number 6, in 6 games, 4-2. So this was an interesting series in that, and I know if you're a Calgary fan, maybe, I don't know, just find something happy. They should have been up 3-1, and they couldn't hold that lead. Dallas fights back, wins 3 games in a row, convincingly in Game 6. And so Calgary ends up being out, and you feel like they might have lost a series that was right within their grasp. It was so close. So Calgary ends up having to make some changes in the offseason. Now, number 5 seeded Vancouver, they are the only team to upset the home team in round 1. Keep in mind, all of these games being played in Edmonton for the Western teams, Toronto for the Eastern teams. There are no home games. St. Louis is out in 6 against Vancouver. And interestingly enough, both Toronto and Edmonton, who going into the playoffs, people said, oh, these teams are going to have a huge advantage because that's their home rinks. Both of them were out during the play-in round. They didn't even make round 1. So we go to round 2. The New York Islanders, the number 6 seed, they take out the Philadelphia Flyers in 7. Took a full 7 games. But the Flyers just didn't have the offense as had been expected against the Islanders. Tampa Bay, the number 2 seed, they take out Boston, the number 4 seed, in 5. And Boston is not a good matchup for Tampa. Like, Boston cannot equal what Tampa does. It's almost like Tampa was playing a Boston game, but with more skill. And so for Boston, the crash happened earlier this year than last year by 2 rounds. So eventually the crash happens with Boston, just happened earlier this year than usual. Vegas, the number 1 seed, they hold on to defeat Thatcher Demko, Jacob Markstrom, and this team called Vancouver Canucks in 7. The interesting thing is, because this series went to 7, I kind of feel like there may be those fans out there that say, oh, the Canucks were so close. But in reality, it was the goaltending dragged them there. And it was Vegas' inability to finish that dragged this series to 7, as we would see in the following round. So I think there's some danger to maybe see the Canucks as being better as a team than what they really are, because their goaltending was just so good during that round to take nothing away from them. Nothing. Dallas, the number 3 seed, they beat Colorado 4-3. They'd been up 3-1 and very nearly lost the series. Very, very close to losing the series. But Colorado, decimated by injuries, down to the number 3 goaltender. Eventually that caught up with them. So the Dallas Stars move on to the conference finals. In the conference finals, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the number 2 seed, well, they beat the New York Islanders, the number 6 seed, in 6. But of all of the rounds for Tampa, so Tampa, it's 5 games against Columbus, 5 games against Boston, 6 games against the Islanders. I think of all 4 rounds, the Islanders gave them the toughest challenge. I do. I think that was a really tough series for Tampa, and there were points during that series where there was some sunlight for the Islanders that I don't know if the finalists had in comparison. Dallas would end up beating the Vegas Golden Knights 4-1. Vegas, again, trouble scoring. And the Canucks, it felt like it got in their heads that they were having trouble scoring. But in the series against Chicago as well, there were points where Vegas had trouble scoring, that Corey Crawford looked fantastic. So for Vegas, they seem to be one of these teams right now that have this ability to make every goaltender look great. So, and this is something they'll have to work on going into the 2020-2021 season, whenever that's going to happen. So Dallas beats Vegas. Anton Hudobin stands on his head and becomes a folk hero to Dallas fans. And then in the finals, well, Tampa wins that. Tampa gets the redemption after 2019's sweep that they suffered against the Columbus Blue Jackets. They beat Dallas 4-2. And again, it feels like once Tampa gets going and all cylinders are firing, that Dallas just can't keep up. Nobody can. So for Tampa, they only lose 4 games on their way to a Stanley Cup. 6 games on their way to a Stanley Cup, which in this day and age is pretty fantastic. With the amount of parity we have in the league, the fact that they weren't pushed to a 7th game, they were pushed to a 6th twice and to a 5th twice. So they lost 1 twice, they lost 2 twice. You guys know what I'm getting at. And it was a very good season for them. Now the trophy winners, which I've done in all of these videos where we look at the season, and it does get more challenging because there are more teams. And in the 2020 season, it just feels like there's more to go over that's not awards related. So your Hart, Lindsay, and Art Ross winner is Leon Draisaitl. He really came into his own this year. And it gets overshadowed now because so much time has passed since March, and the Oilers did lose the play-in round against Chicago. So all of that kind of gets missed, just how excellent Draisaitl was. Your Norris winners, Roman Josi, who had an amazing season for Nashville. And while John Carlson was running away with the Norris Trophy early, Josi charged late in the season. Calder goes to Cale Makar. He is challenged by Quinn Hughes, who has an excellent season for Vancouver. But Hughes, it feels like, is a little bit behind Makar in the curve. And I think it was an advantage to Makar that he had played in the playoffs last year. So I think Makar was just absolutely fantastic throughout the year. One of the best defensemen in the league. He is in my top 20 defensemen now. So is Quinn Hughes, to be honest. But for me, Cale Makar, absolutely deserving of the Calder. The Lady Byng went to Nathan MacKinnon. The Vezina went to Connor Hellebuyck. There wasn't really much debate about Hellebuyck. The one that might challenge him would be Vasilevsky, but it was really Hellebuyck's award. Masterton went to Bobby Ryan, who had an emotional comeback, and he had a hat trick against the Vancouver Canucks. It was nice of Vancouver to let him get the hat trick, right? That's what happened. Sure, I can have that. Let me have that. The Jack Adams for Coach of the Year went to Bruce Cassidy, as it went to a coach of a team that was far and away the best during the regular season, and a team that was expected to be one of the best. So it's one of those unusual moments where you see a guy get Coach of the Year who might very well be the best coach in the league, but usually the Jack Adams goes to an unlikely playoff team, which is why I thought Dave Tippett would get it, because he managed to coach the Oilers into 5th spot in the West. But of course, they lose the play-in round against Chicago, so that, again, gets kind of shoved under the carpet. And then the Selke goes to Sean Couturier, and Couturier had an amazing season for Philly, and it's about time he got the Selke. I've been arguing he's the best defensive forward in the NHL for years. So, and I say that while Bergeron's still playing, and I love Bergeron. Bergeron is in my mind number 2, but I think Couturier probably passed him 2 years ago. But hey, that's how the awards sometimes work. You've got to prove it more than once, and it takes a while sometimes for the writers to vote for you. But there you go, the 2019-2020 season, a season that took almost a full year to complete, as the Stanley Cup was awarded in September for a season that started the previous October. It was a long year. And it feels like it was a long year too, doesn't it? But for Tampa fans, it ended up being worth it in the end. Now for 2020-2021, odds are we don't see that many games played during the regular season, which gets into that whole Ovechkin conversation with the Rocket Richard and his chase of Gretzky, but that's for a whole other time. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. 2019-2020 season. It was fun, and I waited over a month to do this video on how the season ended, but there you go. I got it done. Thanks again for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.